Hi, this video is blocks part 2, the continuation of my earlier blocks video, which covered the basic concept of what a block is and how to create one and how to edit one. In this particular blocks video, I'm going to go through attributes, why they're important, and how you can use them to make your block a little bit more flexible. You'll see attributes used a lot in AutoCAD when you have a block that needs to have text in it, because the idea of a block kind of locks all those parts of the block together. But the problem with that is that many times you want to be able to modify text inside the block, but if that's fixed in the block, then how do we modify it? So attributes solve that problem. So you'll often see them used on tags when it comes to a floor plan, such as section tags, elevation tags, tags to identify windows, doors, furniture, equipment, appliances, and things like that. So this is an easy example right here. This is a tag that can be used to identify furniture or equipment or appliances. So it's a simple shape with a number or a letter inside, and then it would often refer to a schedule or a list or a table of what the furniture or equipment or appliances are in terms of manufacturer, make, model, and all that information. So it's just a regular block. It just sits there and represents information that is shown on a technical drawing. But what's flexible about it is the attribute. So if I double click on that attribute, it opens up and allows me to change that number. So if I want to call that block 35 instead of 34, I can do that. And then hit OK, and now the number is changed. So that's what an attribute allows you to do, is it has a block, but it allows you to change the what looks like text inside the block. Technically, it's an attribute instead of text. When you're in the attribute editor, you do have a couple other tabs where you can change text options and properties. Generally speaking, you don't want to mess with this very much because if the block is set up correctly ahead of time, all that should be already predetermined in terms of the size of the text and the font and the justification, in addition to the layer, line type, and color, and all that information. So this shouldn't really be something that you have to worry about if the block is intelligently created to begin with. This is an example of a construction floor plan, architectural floor plan that has a lot of those types of blocks. So I just wanted to show some examples. So there are window tags here that have attributes in them, room tags that have the name of the room and the number, and those are the same type of blocks with attributes. This is a signage tag for signage that needs to be mounted on the wall, door opening numbers, section tags, elevation tags, which are located, for example, here. Detail callouts to show enlarged areas of the plan. So all those are examples of blocks that include attributes, just to give you an idea of how important and common that is. So if we want to kind of reverse engineer this block, let's do that to show you how it's constructed. So I'm going to copy it over here to the side, and then I can explode it, because explode will always break the block into its original entities. So that's X enter. And you can see it's basically just made up of a standard polyline, and then the attribute is what's inside that is receiving the text that you enter when the block is created at the end. So if I double click, you can see that the attribute definition always contains three pieces of information. The first is the tag, which is visible when the block is exploded. Generally speaking, it's not visible to the users otherwise. The prompt, which tells the user what information is supposed to be filled in, so that part is visible. And then the default, which means when the block is first made, what's going to get shown in that text until somebody types something otherwise. So those are the three things that always have to be entered as part of an attribute. So let's say we're ready to make a block with attributes from scratch. How would we go about that? The first thing to consider is whether you want your blocks to be annotative or not. Now, hopefully you've watched the text and dimension videos where I've gone over the concept of annotation scale. Blocks don't necessarily have to be annotative to work, and you can manually scale or automate your scaling process through other methods, but now that the annotative scaling features are here, I think it makes sense to take advantage of them. So if you're making a tag and you want it to work at different scales, like an 1/8 scale floor plan and a 1/4 scale floor plan at the same time, then you would have to set up an annotative scale then you would want your block to be set to work with the annotation scale, unless you plan to customize that in some other way, which is still possible. So when I make the original version of the block, I'm going to set my annotation scale for right now to full size so that the block understands what size it's supposed to be at full size. And then when it is scaled to the annotation scale, the eighth or quarter or something else, it'll be the correct size for those scales. So I'm setting that to full scale for right now. And then afterwards, I can adjust it for whatever plan or drawing I'm working on. So I'm going to draw a rectangle, and now as I draw the block itself, I can consider what scale do I actually want it to be on a printed plan. Because of that, I'm going to actually I'm going to hit escape on the rectangle. I'm going to make the attribute first, and then I can make the rectangle a comfortable size to go with the attribute. To create an attribute, I can either use the shortcut, which is ATT, or I can go to the Insert tab on the ribbon and click Define Attributes there. So either one will work. When you type ATT or click on Define Attributes on the ribbon, then the Attribute Definition dialog box comes up. The three main fields are the ones that I showed you earlier. So I'm going to type Equipment number without spaces in the first box, and then I will spell it out more clearly in the second box because that's what the users are more likely to see. And then in the third box, I can put a default response like a number sign or a dash. I'm going to change my justification to center or middle center. Either one would work. And I'm going to keep this turned on annotative for my text style and keep my annotative box checked, and then have my text height at 330 seconds so that all of these will work with the scale features. I'm going to leave this on lock position, which keeps users from moving the attribute around for consistency. Now I'm going to let this go to 0, 0, 0 point in space so that it will be defined as the base point for the block later. So I'm going to hit OK. So that has gone to 0, 0. I'm going to hit zoom extents to see where it went. There it is. Now I can put a rectangle around my block and have some idea of what size it needs to be relative to the text that's going to be in it. Normally, if I was doing this officially, I would pick a very specific size. I'm just going to do a quick rectangle for right now to kind of show you how this works. But normally, you don't want to just draw a random size on the box. You want to decide really what size you want it to be. Now, I'm letting the tag hang out of the rectangle a little because I know that when people actually use this tag, you're not going to have like 5 or 6 digits in there for the number. So consider the size of the box or shape relative to how the tag is used, not how the tag looks right now. So that may be all that I need for this particular tag. So now I'm ready to actually make the block. So I can select my objects, type B for block, just like when I went through the block command before. I'm going to type equipment tag. I'm being specific about the name and careful because I already have a different block inserted, the older one with a different name. So if you type a block definition and the name matches a block definition that's already in your project, then that's one method you can use to update the block definition. In this case, I don't want to overwrite it, so I'm giving it a different name. I'm leaving my base point at 0, 0, 0 because I specifically put the tag at that insertion point a minute ago, so I don't have to change the base point now. And then I'm converting to block, that's right, and I have my 2 objects selected, so that's right. So I can hit OK. Actually, I need to check my annotated box, and then I hit OK. So that's going to allow it to respond to my annotation scale. So now I hit OK, and then I can enter a number if I want. It doesn't really matter at this point. So there's my block. So now, how do I use this? Well, if I have a floor plan, I'm going to draw a quick rectangle to represent a floor plan, 80 feet by 100 feet. So there's my floor plan. Okay, let me offset that for some generic wall thickness. All right, so now if I want to use that block at an annotation scale, I'm going to set my annotation scale, maybe to 1/8 of an inch per foot. And now I can use the insert block command with I and have my block selected. I want to check the box for insertion point so that it allows me to pick where the block goes. And then I will hit OK and click where I want to place the block and type in the number when it prompts me. and hit OK. So now I have the ability to insert the block as many times as I need by using the insert block command, and it will pick up the annotation scale that is currently assigned so that the symbol will be sized appropriately. So if I'm working on a different plan and it's at quarter scale, I can insert the block again and leave my insertion point checked so I can hit OK, click to drop the symbol, type in the number code that I want, and then the block is sized appropriately for a quarter scale. So that's an easy way to set up a block in your file and then let it work with the annotation scale and use the insert block command each time you need it. Obviously, another option, if I'm working at one scale and I'm going to need 20 of these blocks, I can also copy this around all over my plan and then just double click to change the label to say whatever number code I need it to have. So that's another option in how to use these. Remember, if you need to fix your annotation scale on any of these blocks, it's easy to do by selecting it. And this is the same as text or dimensions. And then I can go to the properties palette and hit my annotative scale field and then click on the little box with 3 dots. And then I can add whatever scales I need, detach any unnecessary scales in order to fix the scale if I, for example, change my mind on what scale this plan is going to be used at. Another option for getting to that fix is on the annotation ribbon. At the right side, you can add/delete, or you can add the current scale if you have already corrected this annotation scale button at the bottom. So that's an easy way to use blocks. Don't let the annotation scale issue confuse you. You don't have to use it. You can just make a block at a size you need. You don't have to check annotative. And then basically the block just sits there and has that modifiable attribute in order to represent the text inside it. An example of when annotation scale isn't necessary on a block is a title block. So here's an example of a title block and how attributes are very useful in setting it up. Because when you bring the title block in to your paper space, you want it to be a block, but you would often need to update things like this project name, things like that. Keep in mind, when I recorded the XREF video, I pointed out how title blocks are often used as an external reference. So if that's the case, then you would have your title block inserted into model space, update your attributes there, and save that as a master title block, which is then XREF'd to various paper spaces or layout tabs of other files. Either way, the attributes are necessary in order to update the information in the title block. So here you can see there's various tags, tag 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. for the various information. The tag numbers are just generic because they're not generally what the user would see when they're updating the information. So let me show you what I mean by that. So I'm going to go back to my other file. So let's say I have this floor plan and now I want to bring in that title block. So I'm going to go to Paper Space. I'm going to get rid of these 2 viewports for a minute and insert that title block by browsing and inserting that at 0, 0, which is your normal way to insert it. So now by bringing that block in, it prompts me to fill in my attributes. And you can see how none of the tag things show up. It's the second line of each attribute that is visible to the user. So I could enter the project name at this point. You don't have to fill in all this information now. I'll just do enough that you can see how it works. Some gobbledygook so you can see where that's going to go. And then I can hit OK. I need to update my paper size, obviously, because it's too small. But you can see how the attributes were filled in by what I was typing there. So I just updated the plot settings real quick so that you could see a little easier. So each of these is an attribute. You can double click in order to modify the attribute, or you can actually stay here and modify all the attributes if you want to fill in the various title block information. Now, one challenge when setting up a block that's this complicated is getting these tags to show in the order here that you want. And that's kind of a weird part about using multiple attributes in a block. When you make the block originally, you would have to specifically select these attributes in the order that you want them to show in the attribute manager. So if I was making this into a block here, I would have to pick these objects in this particular order in order to have them show in the order that I wanted when somebody's editing the block. Now, more recently, AutoCAD's gotten a little smarter in that regard. And if I use the Manage Attributes section of the ribbon, you can select a block in the pull down and reorder the attributes. So this is a great thing that they started adding to AutoCAD, is the ability to resort the attribute order. So that's an easy way to fix that issue. If your attributes are not in the right order, then you can easily fix them by using that Manage Attributes section of the ribbon. The shortcut of which, by the way, is Batman, which always makes me laugh a little. It's easy to remember that. You can just think about Batman, although with two T's. So those are some other little wrinkles that you may run into as you work with blocks. So you can make a title block, set that up however you want. If you do that, usually I use an outline that represents the overall size of the paper it's intended to go on. And then when you place it, it's easy to get it at the corner of 0, 0 and have it centered, etc. When you make the block, try to remember to pick the attributes in order, like this, and then it'll be easy when you have someone filling it in. But if you forget to do that or you have a few out of order, it's easy to fix with the Batman command or the Manage Attribute. One other thing that's important to keep in mind as you make more complex blocks is the insertion point that you want to have active. In general, you want the most logical handle to be active. On a title block, that's normally a corner that you want to go to 0, 0. Or on a tag, like I was doing earlier, you might want it to be the center point. So relate that to the 0, 0 point in your main title block or block file. And if you need to fix it, you can use the base shortcut at the command line and then select which point you want to be the main insertion point. That's just one little tip in terms of working with blocks and making them as easy to use as possible. Now, another tip, if you're working with a tag like this, you want all those entities inside the block to be on layer 0, and then generally you want all the colors and line weights to either be by layer or by block. You don't want to, if possible, you don't want to hardwire layers, colors, or line weights into the block because if you have that in a bunch of different CAD files, then it's more difficult to change or revise. Something like a title block, you're going to want to have more control over the line weight and the colors and whatnot because there's a lot of stuff included in it. So it's a little bit more difficult to have everything on 0 and everything as by layer or by block for color and line weight. So it's not always possible. But on a simple block like a tag, then you'd want to have all that information set up by layer, by block, and on layer 0. Layer 0 has very special properties. This is actually one of the few things that layer 0 is intended for, is it has very unique properties. When you have the objects on layer 0 inside a block, and then you put the overall block on a layer, it inherits the properties of that layer that you put the overall block on. So for example, when you have a tag like this, you can put it on some other layer and it will pick up the properties of the layer that you put the overall block on rather than the layer or information that's hardwired inside the block entities. So layer 0 is intended to be used for very few things, and that's one of the ones that is meant to be used for. Otherwise, you should have a layer for the other objects in your plans that is specifically meant for those objects. I think that's it for now. Stay tuned for at least one more block video because I need to go over dynamic blocks, which are a whole nother animal.